Liz, lastly, if you notice that there are other school committee members involved, could you also put that in the chat for Kamani and I to see, please?
I will.
Great.
We're live.
Excellent.
Hello, hello, welcome everyone. Hi, good afternoon, happy Tuesday. It's Tuesday, yeah, it's Tuesday. I can wait a little bit, about a minute more for more people to pour in. Hello, hello, hello to my fellow BSAC colleagues. Hi, guys. Alrighty then.
Ayo's here. Excellent.
Hello, hello. What's up, Kat? All right, guys. Well, good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity for just being here. My name is Kamani James, and I am here with my fellow school committee member, Michael O'Neill. We are both members of the Boston School Committee, and we just want to say thank you to the Boston Student Advisory Council, BSAC, for co-hosting this student-centered listening session with us today. You can find the documents for today's session posted on the school committee's webpage at bostonpublicschools.org/school committee. Again, that would be bostonpublicschools.org/school committee. And it was just posted in the chat. It will be under the February 9th meeting link. And we'll also post a link, yes, in the chat as well. So that was just posted in the chat. The meeting documents have been translated in all the major BPS languages, and any translators that are not ready prior to the start of the session will be posted as soon as they're finalized. The committee is pleased to be offering live simultaneous interpretation in Arabic, Cabo Verdean, Cantonese, Mandarin, Haitian Creole, Portuguese, Somali, Spanish, Vietnamese, and American Sign Language. After I finish introducing the interpreters, we will activate the interpretation icon. It's going to look like a globe at the bottom of your screen. And all you have to do is click on the icon to select your language preference in order to access the feature, you have to be updated to the latest version of Zoom. So if you're not updated to the latest version of Zoom, I would do that very quickly. Moving forward, a lot of meetings are going to be having that globe icon so we can increase our just information access and break down those language barriers. And I will also be reminding myself to speak a little bit slower sometimes for the ASL interpreters and interpreters in general. I'd like to start by introducing our Arabic interpreter, Ahmed. Ahmed, will you please invite our speaking audience to switch their Zoom channel in Arabic?
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Ahmed Rubai. I will be your Arabic interpreter today. مرحبا. أنا اسمي أحمد الربيعي. ندعوكم إلى الاستماع إلى الترجمة باللغة العربية من خلال الذهاب إلى أسفل الشاشة. ستشاهدون علامة الكرة الأرضية. اضغط على الكرة الأرضية ستخرج لديك خيارات اللغات التي تستطيع السماع إليها. اضغط على اللغة العربية ومن خلالها ستتمكن من سماع الترجمة باللغة العربية. شكرا جزيلا. Thank you.
Shukran.
Thank you so much, Ahmed. I'd like next to go to our Cabo Verdean interpreter, Isabel Alves da Silva. Will you please give the Zoom instructions in Cabo Verdean?
Ok, eu sou Isabel, a minha Isabel crioulo, intérprete de crioulo cabo-verdiano. Se você qualquer coisa na Zoom, tem link lá de baixo que mora quadrado, você pode ir na ele e deixar o acesso a Zoom Meeting, você pode papiar conosco, qualquer coisa que você pergunta, você traduz para você. Obrigado e tenha bom dia. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Isabel.
You're welcome.
Our Cantonese interpreter, Anna, will you please give Zoom instructions in Cantonese?
Sure, thank you, Mr. James. 你好，我係 Anna，我係你嘅廣東話翻譯服務員。如果你想聽到廣東話翻譯服務嘅話咧，咁你見到啲熒光屏下面咧有個地球儀嘅圖標，咁你就係撳呢個地球儀嘅圖標，咁你就選擇 Cantonese 廣東話，咁你就會聽到我廣東話翻譯噶啦。如果你睇唔到呢個地球儀嘅話咧，即係話你嘅手機或者你嘅電腦冇呢個功能，咁咧你就要去上 Zoom 個網址更新最新嘅版本，網站係 Zoom US 揀一揀 download。多謝，我錫 ，thank you。
Thank you, Anna. Our Mandarin interpreter, Tina Wang, will you please give Zoom instructions in Mandarin?
Thank you, Mr. James. 欢迎大家，我是您的普通话翻译，我是 Tina。那么一会儿呢，你会在屏幕的下边看到带有翻译字样的地球图标，请你选择 Chinese， 是我的这个普通话的频道。那么如果你要上不了 Zoom 的话，请更新你的 Zoom 软件，要下载这个到他们的链接是英文支持那个词，然后 Zoom， 然后一个点儿，这个美国就可以点击之后就可以下载。好，谢谢您，一会儿见。Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our Haitian Creole interpreter, Sergio, will you please give Zoom instructions in Haitian Creole? Is Sergio there with us? I believe you're on mute, Sergio.
Hi.
Hi.
Oh, perfect. Hi, everyone. My name is Sergio Saint-Hilaire, Haitian Creole interpreter. Et nous voulons dire bonjour à tout le monde qui a suivi séance après-midi. Nous sommes très contents pour nous avoir. Moi-même, je suis Sergio Saint-Hilaire. C'est moi-même qui traduit pour vous. C'est moi qui permet de comprendre tout ce qu'a fait dit, je dis tout ça dit, m'a traduit pour vous. Si vous avez besoin d'entrer dans la conversation, ou à cliquer dans le globe là, ou qui est en bas computer là, c'est ce computer ou à servir. Ou à cliquer et puis ou à voir que ou à entrer dans la conversation. Toutes sortes d'avez besoin de dire, pas hésiter pour dire pour moi. Et puis m'a traduire pour et puis nous souhaiter que vous passez un bon après-midi. Merci.
Thank you so much, Sergio. Our Portuguese interpreter is Christian. Will you please give Zoom instructions in Portuguese?
Yes, Kimani. Oi, boa tarde, eu sou a Cristiane, eu sou intérprete de português brasileiro. Se você precisa da interpretação dessa reunião em português, você vai achar o canal português no globo, na parte de baixo da sua tela. Caso você não veja, é porque você precisa fazer o update da sua versão de Zoom. Você pode fazer rapidamente e ter a versão mais nova. Caso contrário, você pode clicar nos 3 botõezinhos se você tiver no celular, que também vai aparecer a opção de achar o canal em português. Tá bom? Muito obrigada. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Christiane. Our Somali interpreter is Fatuma Hassan. Will you please give Zoom instructions in Somali?
Hello, galab wanaagsan. Magacayga waa Faaduma Xasan. Waxaan ahay Soomaali loogu wacay inaan kuu tarjumo luqadda Soomaaliga. Haddii aad u baahatid caawinaad inaad fahantid waxa lagu hadlaayo, waxaad taabanaysaa shiishada meesheeda hoose, waxa ku yaala oo calaamadaha dhahaya qaaraddu ku sawiran tahay oo magaca Soomaali ayaa ka xulanaysaa. Markaad taabatid waxaa helaysaa qof ku tarjumaya oo aniga ayaa jooga dhinaca kale oo kaaga tarjumaya. Haddaba intaas ayaan kuu sheegay. Galab wanaagsan. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Our Spanish interpreter is Juan Bernal. Will you please give Zoom instructions in Spanish?
Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. This is Juan Bernal. I am the Spanish interpreter. Thank you, Mr. James. I will be interpreting simultaneously for those in need of interpretation. I will now proceed to explain how to access the interpretation icon in Spanish for those in need of interpretation. Muy buenas noches para todos. Mi nombre es Juan Bernal. Soy el intérprete para español. Voy a estar interpretando simultáneamente esta reunión para aquellas personas en necesidad de interpretación. Tienen que buscar en la parte baja de la pantalla un icono redondo que parece un globo terrestre donde van a tener la opción de seleccionar el español. Aparece el inglés, el español, seleccionan el español para escuchar mi interpretación simultánea. Aquellas personas que tengan un teléfono celular van a buscar los 3 puntos que aparecen en la parte superior de la pantalla del teléfono y seleccionan la opción de interpretación. Aquellas personas que no logren accesar el icono de la interpretación van a ir a bajar la versión más actualizada de Zoom. Tienen que ir a www.zoom.us/download. Thank you very much, Mr. James. You may proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan. Our Vietnamese interpreter is Evan Tran. Will you please give Zoom instructions in Vietnamese?
Hi everyone, Evan Tran, Vietnamese interpreter. Xin chào mọi người, con tên là Trần, con là người thông dịch viên tiếng Việt cho bữa nay về cái tổng quát nói chuyện về cái trường ở Boston 5 cho tới 10 phút, rồi 20 phút mình sẽ nói chuyện về cái mục tiêu của cái trường, rồi 20 phút nữa mình sẽ nói chuyện về mấy cái mục tiêu về đang trường làm, xong rồi mình sẽ nói 20 phút cuối cùng sẽ nói về cộng đồng giúp đỡ cho học sinh, và 5 phút cuối cùng là lời xin chào của trường. Cảm ơn.
Thank you so much, Evan. And lastly, our ASL interpreters are Brent Tracy and Aaron Foley. Will you please introduce yourselves?
Hi, this is Aaron Foley, and my colleague Brent Tracy is working right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all the interpreters for being here with us tonight. We will now activate the interpretation icon at the bottom of your screen, a reminder that it's going to appear as a little globe, and you'll be able to press the globe and switch between channels of your preference. I'd like to remind everyone, including myself, to speak at a slower pace to assist our interpreters to make sure that they are translating to our audience in a timely manner. We're here today because our duty as school committee members and as a school committee is to represent the vision and values of our community and really strive to ensure that our students have the utmost effective education experience possible. Today's community engagement session is one of many ways we go about doing that. What we aren't here today to discuss is current issues such as school reopening, policing, and other matters. If you wish to discuss those issues in the context of our 5-year goals and guardrails, this is the conversation for that. If you want to discuss those issues in the context of getting a resolution to a current issue, we have other venues for that, including our regular school committee meetings. And I would also like to add that for my BSAC colleagues who are here and for other students, you will be hearing from me after this retreat over the next several days about separate meetings and sort of avenues that you could explore with me to have your voices heard on other issues if you so wish. But to help improve our present, we have to make a plan for the future, thus why we are here today discussing our goals and guardrails as a school committee. I hope all of that made sense, and I'm very excited to have you all here today to hear the brilliant comments and just conversation that's going to be in this room. As you see presented on the slide, the definition of goals is really the community's vision for what students should know and be able to do. So again, going back to the purpose of what is the school committee tasked with, what is the district tasked with? We are tasked with ensuring that our students have the utmost educational experience that they can, both inside BPS and making sure that when they go beyond BPS, that they're able to really hone in those skills and apply it in a way where they're making change in their communities. So that's really what goals is speaking to. How are we ensuring that we're achieving that? And then guardrails are non-negotiable community values that must be honored while we pursue the goals. So in knowing sort of what we want to accomplish. What do we need to make sure that we're doing and how we're holding ourselves accountable and each other accountable to really achieve those goals. So I do want to just lay out some quick ground rules, where we have to stay on agenda time, of course. And, a reminder for people to speak one at a time. We really want to make sure that everyone's being heard. BSAC, our rules, step up, step back. The chat will be collected as an FAQ, and everyone will also have a Google form to collect feedback as well. I'd like to say that while BPS is making great strides, there's always areas that we can improve. That this goes for any district, any organization, and any individual, really. This spring, we engage in extensive community outreach efforts to develop our current strategic plan. Since the completion of that plan, the school committee has selected 2 sets of measures from the strategic plan that we will monitor closely each month. From the strategic plan, we selected a set of priorities that represent the community's vision for what students should know and be able to do. We call these our goals. And from the strategic plan, we selected a set of non-negotiable community values that must be honored while we pursue those goals. And we call these our guardrails. We're not doing this to replace the strategic plan per se, but to more so really narrow in on specific parts of the strategic plan that we really want to be able to accomplish. And, we want to be able to do this through increasing transparency and sharing accountability for student outcomes. And, as it's no secret that the school committee has been having several retreats over the past several weeks with in partnership with the Great Council for Great City Schools. And I'll just sort of give an analogy that I took away from one of the last retreats, which is, you have a truck and the truck is Mr. O'Neill already knows where this is going, but you have a truck and it can go 12 miles and then only a certain amount of gas. The more trucks you add, the less miles in those individual trucks can go. And I say that to say the more tasks and responsibilities that school committee has, the less further each of those sort of objectives are really fulfilled. So we want to make sure that we are really narrowing our lens and our objectives so that we're really focusing on a specific set of things that we want to see happen so we can do that as effectively as we can. We're very excited to share these goals and guardrails with you all and hear feedback. And with that being said, as Liz has already done, thank you so much. We have our 5 potential goals that are already that we have drafted so far. So as a recap, goals represent the community's highest needs, highest leverage vision for what students should know and be able to do. The school committee selected goals that focus on 1, early literacy, 2, achievement for English learners, 3, achievement for students with disabilities, 4, critical thinking with math, science, and literacy, and then 5, career and college readiness. Because the school committee, a school committee, as I mentioned, that focuses on everything is the school committee that focuses on essentially nothing. And one of the hardest tasks that has been, that we've had to sort of take on is to narrow down to these 5 goals. And obviously there's much more goals that we can be discussing, but we really felt as though these 5 sort of encompassed some others, and it both encompass some others, and 2, really shows 1, the time that we're in currently and in a time of COVID, and 2, sort of what we can do on these issues that have been exacerbated by COVID. As we grow student success in these areas, they will have a significant impact on students' abilities to be successful elsewhere as well. So these are our 5 goals. Read it over again, take it in, let it sink in, because we're going to be hearing, we're going to be having robust conversation and hearing great feedback from you all. And I'll pass it to my colleague, Mr. O'Neill, for the guardrails whenever he's ready.
Thanks, Mr. James, and great job introducing the work to date, and looking forward to conversation to get feedback from all involved and how they feel about these goals. And I do just want to say, when you look at them, you can almost think of it as 3 different stages of a student's progression through BPS, right? When we talk about early literacy, we talk about the early years. When we talk about the critical thinking for math, science, and literacy, we're really thinking about the middle years. And when we're talking career and college readiness, it's not about graduating from BPS, but it's graduating from BPS to take the next stage in your life. It may be college for you, it may be career, but have we set you up to succeed in those steps? Just as you are moving on to college next year, Mr. James, it's not about you graduating from BPS, but it's about you being set up for success in the next step, and all your fellow students. So we kind of thought of these in 3 different blocks. And then obviously, we focused on achievement for some particular blocks of students that we really wanted to make sure were included and were an important part of BPS overall. So thank you for laying that out. As you talked about, we also talk about our potential, and we're going to have time for everyone to give us feedback on goals, and then we're also going to ask for feedback from you on our guardrails. So just as Mr. James laid out the potential goals, I'd like to lay out the potential guardrails. To us, the guardrails represent the community values that are valuable, right? And they're non-negotiable. They must be pursued, they must be honored, they must be in place as we move towards our goals. So what we're trying to do is make sure the school committee is always focused either on goals, which are student outcomes, or they're focused on the guardrails, and I'll step through them in a minute. Or occasionally we have to talk about some things at a school committee level that, you know, are required by law. We have to approve an innovation plan, et cetera. But we should really be making sure that the school committee is focused on these 3 buckets of work. That's how we can be most effective, but we can only do that if we believe we are focused on the right goals and guardrails, and that's where the input from everyone really makes a difference for us. And I also want to point out that you'll notice on these, we do not have specific metrics against them, because we first wanted to touch base with the whole range of community, including all the folks on the line today, about were these the right guardrails. And we didn't want people to focus on the metrics yet about, you know, achievement should go from A, early literacy should go from A to B. We wanted to have the conversation, should we be focused on early literacy? Then once we get that touch base, we, you know, the members of the school committee, and by the way, several others are on the line listening today as well, including Jerry Robinson and Renati Diageo and Alex Alva-Davila, our chair. So they're on the line listening, but it is Mr. James and I who are co-hosting this today and engaging with you in the feedback. And so once we get the feedback, we'll touch base again about are these goals and guardrails right? And then we'll set up potential metrics against them and have conversations about that as well. So just in case folks are wondering, you know, why don't you have metrics? How are you going to measure that? That is going to be an important part of it, but we wanted to have this touch base first. So now on guardrails, the non-negotiable community values that we want to put out that would love your feedback on is, first of all, student voice and family engagement. That BPS will leverage the cultural and linguistic wealth of students and families. We want to make sure to increase student voice, and we want to create partnerships that recognize the value of student and family, their value, their assets, and their needs. Second of all is community partnerships. What are we doing to work with community partners to help prepare students for unlimited global and local opportunities? And so that's talking about the city as a classroom, the region as a classroom, and then actually international travel, when it comes back, the opportunity for students to travel and make sure that that is equitably offered across the entire district, and that students can learn and be prepared to grow for the global economy that we're all a part of now. The next is equity and opportunity gaps. And we want to make sure BPS will implement with fidelity opportunity and achievement gap closing practices that are research-based and data-driven, from the classroom to the school all the way up to the district level. And so folks, and I will say, folks have said to us, well, our strategic plan that Mr. James talked about said that closing the achievement gap is the #1 priority of the district, and are we taking away from that? And I want to assure you that we are not at all. This is why that is so important to us. That is why we are trying to look at goals and guardrails, because we feel by doing those with fidelity, it will lead to closing the achievement gap. We are actually trying to take it to a more tactical level to be able to improve for all of our students. A diverse and effective staffing. So BPS will recruit and retain a highly effective, racially and linguistically diverse, culturally proficient workforce that provides rigorous, culturally and linguistically affirming, inclusive curriculum and experiences that celebrate the assets of our students and provide a joyous and positive school experience. And lastly, social, emotional, and physical supports. BPS will deliver a universal, multi-tiered system of support that addresses the social, emotional, and physical well-being of our students. You may have noticed the past couple of years, we're investing more in school nurses, in school psychologists, in guidance counselors, in social workers. We recognize the enormous toll, in particular, the twin pandemics of the health crisis and the racial injustice that has been exposed for all to see. We recognize the toll that it has taken on many of our students. And we want to make sure that we can continue to deliver a universal system of support across the board in that. So those are the potential guardrails we'd like to put out for later conversation as well. Mr. James?
Thank you so much, Mr. O'Neill, for reading out our potential guardrails. And I'll let about 20 seconds for anyone who may be taking notes to sort of, finish up on this slide or sort of take it all in before we move to our first question of the evening. Alrighty then. So going back to our potential goals, the first question is essentially, which of the 5 goals, the 5 areas that we've outlined, is most important to you? And how can BPS best partner with families and communities to accomplish it? So, to be more specific, how can we as a school committee and the district do a better job of really making sure that we establish those relationships with families and communities and those partnerships with them and that trust and transparency to accomplish the potential goals that we've outlined? So who would like to share first? And I believe I'm not wrong when this is open to anyone and everyone here. So anyone who'd like to speak. Mr. O'Neill, do they raise their hand? Okay, that's what I thought. Yes, so raise your hand virtually, everyone, because I know my BSAC colleagues got a question. Okay, we have one hand raised.
They're not going to be shy, right, Mr. James?
No, not my BSAC, not my BSAC colleagues, not my BSAC colleagues. No.
Oh.
We have Dory. Dory, go ahead. And do I have the power to unmute him or something?
Wait, come on. I think they put me in here.
Yeah, Ms. Parvex takes care of that once you call on it.
I got thrown in here. Okay.
Hello, my name is Dorian, and I was on this topic last night with some counselors, and I feel like a best way for BPS to connect with families and communities and not using them as use them as advertisement within the poor community. I feel like you should definitely take a more deeper look in the communities than what you see up front. Look at the background of these families, and yeah.
Thank you, Dor. Am I on? Oh, thank you, Dorian. I do just want, I feel as though that was a comment on a potential guardrail, which is amazing. I do just want to sort of reestablish that right now we are giving feedback on the potential goals. So early literacy, achievement for English learners, achievement for students with disabilities, critical thinking with math, science, and literacy, and career and college readiness. Are these potential goals that you see on the slide, are these goals that the school committee should be focusing on right now? And why? Why is it important?
And Doreen, you still have the stage, so the microphone. So if you want to unmute yourself, we'd love to hear your thoughts on these goals.
Oh, I didn't know. I'm sorry. I feel like these goals are good. It's in a way that it does support the students in BPS should be able to do. But like, are these like listed in priority, or like it just all the goals are just one main goal?
Great question. So yeah, it's not a priority other than the fact that I think collectively as a committee, we try to think of the progression of students. So early literacy is obviously when you start. Critical thinking with math, science, and literacy, we were thinking that's kind of your middle school years, and then obviously career and college readiness as you finish up with BPS. And then we put achievement for English learners and achievement for students with disabilities right after early literacy, because that carries for those students throughout their entirety of BPS. So it was more of a timeline of how our students with us, not a priority listing. I would say all are equally weighted. Isn't that pretty much the sense, Mr. James, of how we discussed them?
Yes, it is. So, like Mr. O'Neill said, it's really, how are we making sure that our students are set up for success each step of the way? Early literacy from a young age, and then, sort of coupling that with achievement for English learners and students with disabilities throughout their entire experience in BPS. And then making sure that as students progress in BPS, that math, science, and literacy are being thought about in a highly in sort of like a high thinking level type of way. And then eventually making sure that, like Mr. O'Neill said earlier, they're not just ready for college, since not all students may want to pursue that route, but they're really ready to just take on society and in whatever way they see fit, that what's passionate to them, and making sure that that's executed beautifully. I see Simon in here. I'm not sure if Simon wanted to say anything.
Yeah, I got thrown in here, but
Well, you're good at that though, Simon. You're
that's cool. It's cool. So I guess I feel like all these are important in their own way, but I'd say I could speak on the last three real quick. So as far as number 3, I think that this one is important, especially due to the pandemic. From what I've heard and what I've seen in the community, is that a lot of students with disabilities kind of got more affected by at-home learning, because they're more high-need students and need that in-person learning. So I think that that's definitely something to prioritize the next year, due to, like, I forget, someone said about the pandemic has impacted a lot of the goals and what BPS should be focusing on. Number 4, with critical thinking with math, science, and literacy. So my thought about this is that this is kind of a broad thing. I understand that these are all kind of broad, but thinking about the guardrails, right? That's what it's called. I think that it might be important to recognize, like, in thinking about critically thinking with math, science, and literacy, to talk about like anti-racism work, or environmental justice, like adding like more specific curriculum, like vocabulary to the idea of critical thinking with math, science, and literacy. Because I mean, in some ways we already are doing, it's kind of just really like a broad way of talking about that. And then for the 5th one, I just think we need to I go to an exam school that's supposed to be a college ready school, and I have gotten zero help. So that kind of tells you everything that you need to know about that. So I know that schools who aren't considered a college prep school probably are getting even less. So yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Simon. Your feedback is always very high level thinking, so we appreciate you. Up next, we have Oh, please go ahead, Mr. O'Neill.
I echoed your thoughts. Each of those were important feedback. Thank you, Simon.
Yes, thank you. Up next.
And by the way, may I just ask one question, Simon? What year are you?
I'm a senior.
Senior, and you said you haven't received college prep help. You mean for like applications or?
I feel like I've received about the bare minimum. Like, well, throughout my high school career, I've never got taught how to write in the I statement, so I never got taught how to write a college as like a personal statement. I wrote my own guidance recommendation letter. I had one college counselor, but I reached out to her multiple times. But I'm not even blaming her because she has a whole bunch of students. But I had problems with like my, schools when they ask for stuff and you don't know how to, like, in the middle of the application process and like asking my guidance counselor, like, hey, what do I do when this happens? And just getting no response. So that's not helpful at all.
And I will say that Simon and I go to the same school, and I know we're not supposed to be adding our personal opinions, but I'll just say that as a student, he's not wrong. Yeah. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Simon.
Thank you so much, Simon. Can't wait to hear more from you today. Up next, we have Katie, phenomenal BSAC representative, and then Natea, aka Psycho. I know she does not like being called Natea in our BSAC space. She loves being called Psycho. So we'll have Katie, Psycho, and then our BSAC president, Kat. You're on mute, Katie.
Hi guys. Can you see me? You can hear me now, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure. I just wanted to echo what Simon had shared about the college and career readiness. I feel like amidst the pandemic, it has been in remote learning, it has been really hard to get in touch with our college counselors. I'm a senior at BAA. And I'm part of a smaller school environment, so I can't even imagine what it's like to be at an exam school when there's so many more students. But I feel for our college counselors because, they're just having hundreds of students emailing them with questions, and it's not like you're in a building where you can just walk up to the office and knock on the door and ask your question there. And so I feel like that is a really big goal. Also contingent on the fact that we don't know when COVID's going to end. And I know that even before remote learning, college readiness was something that we needed to work on and improve within our district. So I think that's a big goal. Going to goal number 4 with the critical thinking with math, science, and literacy. I think what we also need to think about is the curriculum that we're teaching our students and how we can critically think about that and move it towards being more anti-racist and teaching our student more ethnic driven studies and making sure that we're highlighting Black historical figures in every single what's the word? I don't know why I'm blanking. In every single subject that we're teaching. We need to make sure that we're highlighting that and we're being reflective of our student body in what we're teaching them. And so I feel like that also comes in with critical thinking and the early literacy. I feel like it really starts early on. And so making sure we're implementing that for all the way from our elementary schools to our high schools. And yeah, that's really all I had to share. But I think these are some good goals. And I just think we could expand on it a little bit in how we're thinking about it and possible solutions.
Thank you so much, Katie. And Katie and I actually, we discussed sort of these goals and guardrails prior to the meeting. And, it's so just thank you for everything you said, especially on the matter of early literacy. That's something that really matters to me. My mom always, sat me down and had me read. And also I would say making sure that early literacy is reflective of what society's what society looks like. That's something Katie and I were talking about before this meeting. So, it's the little things that matter. Are we giving our books, are we giving, our children books to read that has 2 fathers as parents? I think that in the long run makes a really sort of big impact on, making sure that we're teaching our kids that, this is what society looks like today. So thank you so much, Katie.
Yeah, and if I might just say, Katie, thank you for your comments. And I'm particularly thinking, you talked about career readiness. And thank you for that feedback. It's really important for us to hear that. And so, and there were folks from the district that are involved today as well. So by informing school committee, you make us better informed to ask questions and to push on that. So it's important for us to hear the feedback. Thank you for pointing that out. You overlap with Simon on that issue. You also overlap with Simon talking about not just critical thinking, but think about the curriculum that goes along with that. And you both talked about ethnic studies. You talk about anti-racist, making it culturally appropriate. And so that's really important to hear as well as your thoughts on early literacy. So thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Katie. We look forward to hearing more from you today. Up next, we have Psycho, Kat, and Anna, our vice presidents of BSAC.
And Mr. James, I also want to point out, didn't we also have AO as well?
Oh, they put their hand down before it could be entered, but AO, BSAC/YOB, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to raise your hand. We'll pop it right in.
Mr. Ulamuyuwar, and I was looking forward to hearing from him. Haven't spoken to him in a couple of years. So, okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. O'Neill, just a quick time check. When should we begin to wrap up a feedback on our goals?
We're doing fine.
Okay, then.
We're doing fine. This is great. Let's keep going.
All right, Psycho.
Hi, my name's Natea. I go by Psycho. It's not that I don't like being called by my first name. It's just Psycho makes me seem cooler. I feel like there's something missing from the goals, actually. Is that okay?
Yep, we can hear you.
I feel like students should have like somebody that they should be able to talk to. Like it doesn't have to be like a therapist, but there's a lot of like stress being a high school student. It's really difficult being a high school student because like a high school student like me, like not only do I have school, but I also have BSAC and I also have another job on top of that. So there's just a lot piled up. Plus, I also have a little brother who does have learning disabilities, so I have to help him too. It's a lot. So I feel like, you know, in school, some kids feel more comfortable with talking to somebody, whether it's in school, outside of school, or like one of their closest friends. I just feel like there should be a better relationship between teacher and student to where we don't feel as though like, I don't like this teacher, you know, she gives me too much work. Like, let there be like more connection based.
Do you think that more an increase in guidance counselor or therapist or school psychiatrist to student ratio would sort of echo your sentiment, Psycho?
Yeah, I feel like it should. I feel like it does. Yeah, basically.
It's interesting you say that because it is so hard to be a high school student. I mean, the pressures on you are enormous, right? And thinking about your future. And then you add the pandemic and remote learning on top of that. And now you don't have the social supports of seeing your friends and classmates on a daily basis at the locker, right? At the gym, at the cafeteria, on the bus. And now it's just through a screen like this. Makes it exponentially harder. I think that the district has recognized that and is trying to do a lot of supports, but we can always try to do better, particularly when we hear the voices about how important it is. And I think it is kind of reflected in the guardrails, where we talk about the social, emotional, and physical well-being of our students. We're trying to acknowledge how important that is, but thank you for calling that out. I do also want to point out, when I mentioned that we had some school committee members listening today, we're also joined by our superintendent, Dr. Brenda Casilius, who, as you know, is a big friend of BSAC and loves her time in talking with BSAC, and make sure the school committee knows it. Matter of fact, she often tells us she enjoys her BSAC meetings many times more than the school committee meetings. So thanks for that, guys, for what you do. But I want you to know the Superintendent Casillas is on the line as well today.
Thank you. And hello to Dr. Casillas. Psycho, did you have anything else to add?
Hi, Dr. Casillas.
Hi, Psycho. I'm Nadia.
That's pretty much it. I usually talk a lot, but I don't really have a lot to say.
Oh, well, that was really good. That was important feedback. And you're talking about a difficult subject, right? When you're talking about students' social and emotional well-being, particularly in these times. So thank you for venturing there and for bringing it up. I also want to make sure to call out that folks have started to put some comments in the comment section instead of waiting to speak as well. So for example, and we're going to try to alternate back and forth. So Dorian said, does the career and college readiness and critical thinking with math, science, and literacy cover every school in BPS? And it should, right? Because Dorian points out BPS does have traditional and pilot schools, and pilot schools create their own curriculum and look for their own partnerships differently from traditional schools. That's absolutely true. About 40% of our schools, of our 128 schools, have some degree of autonomy. They could be a pilot school, they could be innovation, they could be a Horace Mann in district. And we're being very respectful of those autonomies. But what we're trying to say here is, what are the base goals? And to say that all of our high school students should graduate career or college ready, it could be, you know, some of our autonomous high schools can think about how to make that happen. But saying that's a baseline goal for all of our students is important. Same thing for our middle schools. Saying critical thinking for math, science, and literacy is an important baseline goal. How schools create curriculum for that may be different depending upon the individual school, but they still should make sure all of our students can reach that. That's what we're trying to accomplish with those. Mr. James?
Yep, definitely. You hit it all on the head, Mr. O'Neill. And thank you so much, Psycho, for sharing that very difficult subject. I personally can relate, so thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Always a pleasure. Up next, we have Kat with his hand raised. So we're gonna go Kat, Anna, and then Tiffany.
Hello? Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Kat.
All right. So yeah, what's up, everybody? It's Kat. So for me, in terms of the potential goals, I was mainly thinking about 2, 3, and 5. 2 is for me, like, it hits home because I have a lot of family members who are coming from Cape Verde, and they're like, English is not their first language and they don't understand what's going on. And I know some of them who were just getting adjusted to the language, and then the pandemic hit. So and just from their experience, I don't think it was the best. Definitely think it could have been handled a lot better. But again, the pandemic, no one knew the pandemic was coming, so it wasn't really something that we could prepare for. But I do think that it's great seeing that up here and just accommodating to those people, because sometimes they may not understand the technology, or they may not understand, especially their parents or their family. If they're no one in their family is an English speaker, then that kind of becomes a struggle, and and it becomes a thing where you lose that family, and that's not something you want, losing families during a pandemic, because then that sets a lot of people back in their education. And as a district, I know that's not something we want. In terms of number 3, Simon pretty much said it all, was hitting all the points. Students with disabilities, it's just important to have them in the space, and it's harder for them to learn remotely. I do, like, at my school, I heard that it was going well, but I don't know if that's the same thing across the district, and I don't want to assume that that's the same thing across the district. But regardless, though, I do think that these individuals should be prioritized and should be given as much aid as they need, because, again, it goes back to that point of we don't want to lose people. In terms of 5, college readiness, I don't think that schools themselves are really helping with college readiness. I think that they rely too much on programs and external sources. I think that they're trying to give that responsibility to, like, outside sources. So maybe if schools themselves were more involved and more like reaching out to students and just being aggressive isn't the right word, but I'm just going to use aggressive for now, and getting out to their students and making sure that they're getting things done on time and giving them the aid that they need, even beforehand, to get them on track earlier. Like, I know that a lot of students could have started this process junior year, but here we are starting senior year. So yeah. And in terms of career readiness, no, not at all. I dislike this a lot because I feel like there's so much more out there in the world, and the fact that we focus so much on college, to me, is a bit annoying, because there's so many opportunities nowadays with how much our economy and whatnot is evolving. There's so many more opportunities and so many more fields that don't require college, and who knows, students may find their passion in something else that doesn't require them to go to college. And here you're having students go and waste their time at something and do something that they don't really want to do, or they didn't have to necessarily do, to go into a field that they're passionate about. So I think just exploring that career readiness field more, and just giving more opportunities and bringing more of these opportunities to students' plates gives them more. Yeah, it just gives them way more leeway to do whatever they want with their life and just say that they lived a fulfilled life. So yeah, that's my take on the goals. Those are the three that I think definitely should be prioritized, and I'm really happy seeing them up here.
Go ahead, Mr. O'Neill.
Yeah, thanks. Kat, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks for that, and particularly the way you called out college isn't, we want our students prepared for college if they want to go to college, if that's the right choice for them. This is tough to say to some people who think, college for all, but college isn't for all. There are a number of really worthwhile careers that may require a certificate program, some type of certification, may require vocational training, that you can be doing really well in your career, and you have decided college is not the next step for you. We want our students to be ready for college if that's the path that they choose, but we also want to acknowledge that in today's economy, there are different paths for students, and they should feel validated in that choice if that's the path they decide to go. And I'll stop there, Mr. James. I see we have 5 people with their hands up about this topic, so we should probably announce them and then move on to the guardrails section, if that makes sense.
Definitely. Thank you. And thank you, Kat, for everything that you added. It was absolutely brilliant. And I know it's something that we talk about on our late night phone calls quite often. So thank
Yep.
Thank you, Vice President Barbosa. President Barbosa, excuse me. Gotta respect the title. And now we have Anna, our Vice President Zhao. Hello.
Hello, everyone. I wanted to speak upon goal number 1 and 4. I think there could be some intersections between the goals. In early literacy, it's really important for us to establish, proper education and equal level of education for every single elementary school kid and middle school kid in the district. Because, going through BPS since elementary school, I see a lot of emphasis being put on the exam schools. And I don't think that should be it. I think, every single school in the district deserves to have the same level of education to have all the students be prepared. So I think it's really important for us to put emphasis on critical thinking, math, literacy, language. Every single one of these subjects should be touched on equally in different schools, no matter if they're exam school, pilot school, or any type of special school within our district. Everyone should have that same level of education. And I think this is very difficult on Zoom. I personally have a younger sister who's in elementary school, and since Zoom school have started, it's been really difficult for these teachers to continue teaching these little kids, keeping them engaged in the classrooms and still ensuring that they're getting the education they need to, continue moving on in their education. So I think we really need to put emphasis on these and combine the two. Early literacy is really important, but it's also teaching the kids in different subjects like your math and sciences for the, our future generations to really explore all their options, not just in, one field, for them to really explore all their different options. And I'm a current senior in high school. And I also want to talk about goal number 5, career and college readiness. I totally agree with what Kat said. You know, there's so many options that we could explore in our days. You know, not everyone wants to go to college. And I think our district have so many partnerships with, you know, community organizations, but I think some schools not all schools in our district have access to this. I think it's really important to make sure that every single school have access to these wonderful opportunities, and it's not being put in those, you know, 2 or 3 special schools that we have in the district. Every single student in our district deserves equal treatment and equal access to education and, you know, post high school opportunities. That's my take.
Thank you so much, Vice President Zhao. That, you know, that was beautiful. And, you know, to echo what you were saying and what Simon said in the chat, you know, it's really about what's the end goal? Are we telling our students, well, you need to learn X, Y, and Z so you can get to this exam school or you can get to this Ivy League college? Or are we telling them you need to learn X, Y, and Z because it's going to help you with high level thinking that you can then be used to apply to your community and into society to help develop it? So it's really about what's the end goal? What are we trying to get out of our students? And that's something that we talk about all the time in BStack. So thank you for bringing that to the table.
Yeah, and thank you, Anna, for talking about that, or Madam Vice President, I should say. Thank you as well for serving in that role. But you're right, what we're talking about here is kind of minimum standards for all of our schools, right? It's up to the students and their families to choose what's the right path for them. We're not dictating it, and we shouldn't be saying one is better than the other. But it's how do we help prepare you to be engaged, lifelong learners that are engaged in a global economy, that you're active, engaged citizens, prepared for life and your career, whatever you choose to do. It's not about saying this is the right thing, you should be at that school, you should be doing this, so on and so forth. And so what are these minimum standards that we want for all of our students to be achieved? That's what we're trying to get at. So that's why we talk about early literacy as an example. So thank you for your comments. Those were really helpful.
Thank you so much, Madam Vice President. And we have 2 final people that are going to be providing their thoughts on our potential goals before we shift to our guardrails. We have Tiffany and Sarah.
Hi, I would just like to speak on like all the goals really. I'm Tiffany and I'm a junior at Boston Latin School, but I also have a younger brother that's in Josiah Quincy Elementary School, and we both went to the same elementary school. And I kind of like realized this thing with early literacy, like over the years, although technology has been a great tool in education, I feel like we need to step back a lot for that for younger children, as I've seen like there's been such a dependence and reliancy on technology for everything that to a point where they do not know how to read an entire book without the help of technology. And it's been insane how like contrasting children in my year when I was younger, the amount of books that we could read comparing to the amount of books that children that I know in my brother's year is just drastic because of that dependency on technology. And for the second one, achievement for English learners, I feel like that's very important as I'm a first-gen immigrant, and the program when I was younger helped a lot with English and learning and kind of getting more involved in my community. And I hope that like continues on for younger kids, but I feel like there should also be an emphasis on English learners for older kids who may not know how to speak English, because I don't really hear about that, or people don't really get information about older kids and how they can access these programs. And it's a lot of the focus is just on younger kids. And I feel like that's extremely important. And for the achievement for students with disabilities, that's definitely important. And I really hope that over the years, teachers in other schools may respect students with disabilities and their needs more, because in my school, I feel like there's a lot of respect to like their needs and requirements, but then like in other schools I've heard from friends and family the lack of respect towards like the actual contracts and requirements for students with disabilities is astonishing, and I really wish there's more emphasis on that in BPS. And for number 4, critical thinking with math, science, and literacy, I really just hope there's more ethnic studies involved in that, because growing up, I've never heard anything about Asians and how their lives were in America and like their struggles and how it's involved in all of the core topics, as well as many of other people of color children who have never heard about their own people in these very important topics that help with like development. And for number 5, for career and college readiness, I would just like to acknowledge the privilege I get as being in Boston Latin School, because starting from junior year this year, we have been preparing for college and we have had various programs to help with that. And I just wish other schools across the districts had the same privilege as I did, because it's not fair for just one school in the entire district to have this privilege to start preparing children since junior year. Like that is a huge achievement gap between all the other schools, and I wish there was a more focus on all the other schools in the district and a less of a focus on feeder school and making kids have the requirement in their brains to get into these exam schools just to be successful in life. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. And your comments were being echoed in the chat as well, you know, specifically regarding the potential goal number 4, you know, in a society where the issue of racism, not race, not just race, but racism as well, and you know, just ethnic understanding is always coming up. And I think that we do need to be able to put that into the classroom so our students are culturally competent of what they're seeing outside of their classrooms and being able to engage in authentic and non-ignorant discussions and conversations about that. So as always, as I keep on saying this for everyone who goes, but I love everything that you guys are saying, and thank you.
Yeah. These have been really, really thoughtful comments. And you're right, you really got me thinking about critical thinking in math, science, and literacy is an end goal, but how the curriculum that is used, that is engaging for students. You know, there's been a lot of comments about ethnic studies programs, culturally responsive, et cetera, anti-racist. The curriculum, the how we get there is just as important as the end goal. And I'm hearing the same comments on career and college readiness as well. And so thank you for your shots and the sensitivity we've heard to our students with disability. Students with disabilities has been great to hear as well. Mr. James, are we ready to move on? Thank you, Anna, for pointing out. I apologize if it's hard to hear me sometimes. I'll try to sit a little bit closer. Sorry about that.
So we have one last person, Sarah, and then we'll transition to the guardrails. Sarah?
Hi, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Hi.
Okay, great. Hi, my name is Sarah Parker. I'm actually, I'm a parent of 3 BPS kids, and I was just listening, and I wasn't actually even planning on commenting, but after listening to all the comments, I wanted to comment and just say that first off, I'm impressed by all the students who made their comments, and they're all very, very thoughtful. And everything that they said, I completely agree with. And it seems like maybe one of the goals that you're missing here is social and emotional health. And I think one of the things, you know, each one of the students kind of touched on their perspective of that, you know, whether it be for career and college readiness, that's social and emotional. I view that as, you know, having a guidance counselor that you can go to that can help you get what you need to get your transcripts ready to send them off to school. Or if you're not going the college path, having programs or a guidance counselor that can point you in the right direction for potential careers. Early literacy, you know, there's social and emotional stuff with kids there. The achievement for English learners, the same thing. I think someone was commenting how their family are first, English language learners and how they needed more support. So that's social and emotional as well. Achievement for students with disabilities, the same thing. And also critical thinking with math, science, and literacy. I believe the same thing. So I just wanted to say that I agree with everything that the students said. And I think they actually are hit the nail on the head with the fact that there's no, I think you need to add the social and emotional piece to each one of these goals to make it well-rounded and to complete the circle of the goals. And that was my comment. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you, Mr. O'Neill.
Yeah, thank you as well. And you're right, and you've almost led us perfectly right into the next section, which is about guardrails, because actually in guardrails, we do talk about the social, emotional, and physical health of our students. So if we could take a moment and flip to the slide where we talk about the 5 guardrails, and then we're going to ask some questions. So I just need to move my screen a little bit so I get the chat out of the way, because I had it open to make sure to hear comments. So the guardrails, as we talked about before, are student voice and family engagement, community partnerships, equity and opportunity gaps, diverse and effective staffing, and as Ms. Parker was just pointing out to us, social, emotional, and physical supports, and as we heard from a number of students before as well. And so social, emotional, and physical supports. And so these guardrails are the non-negotiables. These are what we absolutely must have, and we need to have, and we need to honor as we are working towards those goals. But this is what the school committee would like to put forth, working with the superintendent on what our guardrails would be. But now we'd love to get feedback from folks as they start to think of these 5 guardrails as we move away from the earlier conversation on goals. Which of these 5 guardrails areas are most important to you? And then how can BPS best partner with families and communities to honor them, to actually make them happen? And would love your thoughts on that. So again, if folks would raise their hand in the chat to get started on that.
So I see Katie and AO BSAC/YOB have their hands raised.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
We can.
You hear me? Okay. Let me turn my video on. I don't like talking into the void, Okay, you guys can see me, right? I can see my last time I couldn't see myself, so I got scared. I feel like for me, the most important non-negotiable guardrail is the student voice and family engagement. I feel like as we move forward, that has been one of the biggest things missing within our district that has made the decisions and the action steps we have created the least effective. The action steps, the goals that we have are beautiful, and I feel like we'll make the most progress by not only just including student voice and parent engagement, but really student involvement and parent involvement, making sure that they're not just present at the tables, but able to make decisions as well. And one way that we can do that is by, BSAC's biggest stance, Kimani, his legacy that he wants to leave is really having everybody actively advocating for the student rep to receive a vote by next year. We need to ensure that, all of these goals are set for students, and we need to make sure that our students have decision-making powers within there. And I feel like us as students would feel really supported in that and know that we're being served by seeing our representative actually representing us by voting. And so I feel like that would be a really good action step. I mean, as I'm sure you guys are aware, City Council filed the home rule petition. We're making the movement, but we need to make sure that we're not quite yet because we haven't achieved it yet. So I feel like that's a really good action step. Yeah, that's my non-negotiable community value. I'm really excited, especially where, like we see Mr. James out here having his community education conversations, bringing those comments and what the community is saying back to school committee. Like, it's really beautiful, this movement that we're seeing, especially within this virtual setting where we're having larger crowds come out to school committee. We're seeing more parents and students. I've seen more students this year in my school learn about school committee and what it is that they're doing, and that they even have a student representative than ever before. And we just need to keep that momentum going by constantly having our parents, our teachers, and mostly our students involved. So yeah. Thank you guys.
As always, thank you, Katie. Mr. O'Neill.
Katie, thank you for those comments. A couple of thoughts. Obviously, Mr. James is a very active school committee member, and we deeply appreciate his input and advice and thoughts, as we do from all of BSAC. And there are a number of former school committee representatives. I think Mr. Ulamuyuar hopefully is going to be speaking in a couple of minutes. And so there's a long legacy of student involvement on the school committee. What is required is state law to be changed, which is not in our power. So what we're trying to talk about today is the guardrails that we have and what we can impact. And I do want to point out two things. One, even beyond the student rep on school committee, who is a valued fellow member, Mr. James will tell you, I tell him all the time, you are my fellow member, I'm a fellow member of yours. But we're also trying to step up the student voice in a number of different ways. And so our chair has committed to have more students involved in all the task forces that we have. The recent working group on the exam schools now has a couple of students involved. And as you talk as well about family engagement, the superintendent, as part of her budget, has stepped up and committed to having family liaisons at all of our schools now. So we can, it had been a difficult choice that some school leaders had made for budget reasons the past couple of years to move away from that. But the superintendent is now funding, or has proposed to fund in her budget, family liaisons at all of our schools, and recognizing how important it is for family engagement. So these are the type of things that we have the power to act on, and that we have the power to change and improve. And so thank you for validating how important, and I hear you loud and clear of student voice as priority number one and issue number one. And I think I just want to close by saying the power of student voice has been proven nationwide. And I think, as Mr. James may have mentioned, I serve on a national organization. I talk to school board members across the country, and people have rethought this the past couple of years. I had Mr. James speak as part of a national town hall with student representatives from around the country to school board members and superintendents from around the country last fall. I think people are listening and including student voice more and more, and that's critical, and that's why we have that as a guardrail to begin with. Mr. James, I'm not sure if you want to say anything further.
Oh no, I think that everyone here knows my opinions, and I you know, I want to respect the space that we've created today for what and what not to discuss. Everyone knows my opinion. Katie summed it up beautifully. It's non-negotiable, and it's a movement that shall not be stopped. So yeah. I think up next we have AO BSAC/YOB.
Hold on, I'm on mute. Hi, everybody. IO or AO. I wanted to talk about the last three guardrails that we have. I feel like what I want to say encompasses all three, and it was a little bit mentioned before previously, but I just want to double down on the idea that we are hiring and employing people who are reflective of our rich and diverse population of students. Boston Public Schools at the time when I was student on the school committee was about 14,000 students strong, and it comes from all over the world. We're a melting pot, and that should be reflected in our educators, in our counselors, and honestly in all staff. Going to higher education, that's not the case. That's something we can't control in every single university and stuff like that, but we can control that in BPS. And I feel like for me personally, at the time that I did go to school, there was a time where I was struggling, you know, socially, emotionally, and it was hard for me to come out to people who didn't look like me, who wouldn't understand the same things that I would be going through. So doubling down on the idea that we are having educators and people who hiring those people who do look reflective of the core, you know, the core population, the stakeholders.
That's great feedback. You're right. I think the district has made strong strides the past couple of years in that topic, particularly around the hiring. But they have a ways to go, and the superintendent recognizes that, and her senior team recognizes that, and the school committee does as well, which is why it was so important to put it here as a guardrail. And I do have to shout out, if folks ever wonder about the effectiveness of the BSAC rep on school committee, if you have an M7 pass in your wallet right now, thank AO, who made that his passion when he was a school committee rep. Am I correct? and you made it happen with a very you worked on that for quite a while, and I thank you for that. And many of our students have benefited from your advocacy on that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, AO. Appreciate you. And I actually met him for the first time yesterday. And we're just going to continue to have such great conversations. So thank you. Up next, we have Simon with his hand raised, and then Robin.
Okay, y'all can hear me?
Yes.
All right, cool. So hello, everybody again. So I think I'm gonna speak on the first two. I'll start with the second one and go to the first one last. So the first one is about community partnerships. So I think this one is interesting because we kind of talked about community partnerships in the goals at the beginning. We talked about how some schools have more community partnerships, some schools have less. And I think community partnerships are really important, but I want to emphasize the fact that I think BPS should not be relying on community partnerships for an entire sector of something that that BPS should also be able to fulfill. So for example, we were talking about college readiness. I was relying a lot of my college readiness on the Scholar
Simon,
Athletes
may I
program.
interrupt just for a second? Simon, excuse me, may I interrupt just for a
Yeah, my
second?
fault.
Just ask you to slow down a little bit, please, so the interpreters can keep up with you. Thank you.
Sorry. Okay. I'm gonna just talk a little slower. So we were talking about college readiness and career readiness, and I think like a lot of people said, there are a lot of programs unequitably put throughout schools, but that's a different conversation. But there are a lot of college programs that are put through schools, and I think personally, from my experience, I can say that I relied too much on a program that then failed me, and because they were not a part of BPS, they had no accountability to actually give me support. So, and I'm talking about Scholar Athletes specifically. Oh, I did not mean to do that. I'm talking about Scholar Athletes specifically. They're an example of a program that was in my school, then they weren't in my school, and I had a really good relationship with the person in my school who was, in fact, more of a guidance counselor than I had a guidance counselor. And then they were gone. And like BPS can't do anything about that if they decide to leave because they're a private partnership. So I think I want to challenge BPS to make sure that community partnerships are great and amazing, and I totally support them, but that we also make sure we're not giving a burden that BPS then can't take back if they decide to leave or go elsewhere or whatever they decide to do. And then to speak to the first one about student voice, kind of echoing what Katie was saying, I think that, this kind of even relates back to the school committee. Their power is not always in legislation, but the voice of the school committee to uplift student voice and to uplift parent and family voice is extremely, extremely pivotal. And I think that one way of doing it, like we've been mentioning before, is for, how do I say this? Like a statement that may not hold any weight, like saying, I support the student vote from every school committee member, actually holds a lot more weight, even though it needs to be passed by legislation. It uplifts students. It goes hand in hand with student voice. If every school committee member says, I support the student vote, I think that it's going to make students feel a lot more confident and a lot more feel comfortable testifying at school committee or working with BPS. And the same goes with parents or families. So I think that although no one in school committee actually has a voice in signing legislation or anything like that, the power of your voice, and I'm talking to every single school committee member, is really important. And I urge and challenge you guys to, be accountable when talking about student voice and family engagement in your own words and the things that you say as yourself when you're on school committee, because I think that may hold more weight than one may realize from just blindly looking at it, because there's no legislation or anything like that. So yeah, that's what I had to say.
Great point, Simon. Thank you for pointing that out. Mr. James, you're on mute.
Sorry, my house is currently a bit noisy, so I'm sort of afraid to unmute myself. But up next we have Robin. Is Robin here with us?
Guess not, Mr. James.
Yeah, I don't believe so. So no one else currently has their hands up. You know, yeah, we're nearing that time, but if anyone has any questions or comments, feel free to raise your hand or type in the chat. I know the chat is being utilized, has been being utilized greatly during this meeting, and it will be taken, a reminder that it will be taken as an FAQ and to sort of refer to.
And I do want to give voice to a comment earlier in the chat that I saw. And that was someone who said, how can we help have teachers and students working better together remotely? And they put in the comment that some high school teachers are telling students don't bother to come back into the class when hybrid starts. And I was surprised by that, and I was saddened by that. I hope it is not widespread. And I hope some of our BSAC colleagues can enlighten the superintendent about that in particular. You know, specific examples of that, you know, respecting confidentiality, but obviously that's the type of thing that the superintendent would like to be aware of. So I encourage you to make sure that that is shared with the superintendent through BSAC.
No, definitely. It definitely will be. I think that, yes, our BSAC president and vice president will be on it with staff. I will say that I do echo those comments, and you know, since we're nearing the end of the time, I want to say a huge thank you to BSAC members for coming and sharing your opinions. I know it's hard. It's hard to just be a student during this time. It really, really is. And you know, just today and over the past several days, to sort of echo the comment you addressed, Mr. O'Neill, I personally have been told by, you know, a teacher, you know, like, don't bother speaking to me unless you did your homework. And, you know, like, it's really tough times. It's really tough times. You know, do I go to this listening session where I feel like I have an impact on my community, or do I sort of have to buckle down and do homework so my teacher doesn't feel like ostracizing me in class? So, you know, I do want to be mindful that this is not a regular BSAC day, yet almost a majority of BSAC made time to come to this listening session to offer their comments and their questions on our potential goals and guardrails. So huge shout out to you all for just being unapologetically authentic and coming into this space and discussing with us. And yeah, go ahead, Mr. O'Neill.
I echo what you're saying, Mr. James, and you know, I've always enjoyed when I meet with BSAC because you learn as much as you give, and I know our fellow members who are on the call today are listening and learning as well. But we're going to ask this final question, but I also want to make sure to give space for the superintendent, and it can be now or it could be in a couple of minutes if she wants to think about it. I want to make sure the superintendent has a chance to give some thoughts and reflections on what she's heard today. I know she speaks with BSAC on a regular basis, but she's listening to these sessions because this is a joint effort. This is the 8 of us on the school committee plus the superintendent doing this work around our goals and guardrails, and then ultimately asking people, what's the one thing you're willing to commit to that will support the success of our students in Boston Public Schools? And that's, you know, that's nice. I'd love if folks would throw some comments in the chat maybe about what they're willing to commit on. But I mean, I've heard such commitment from the students today that have spoken about, you know, your thoughts about the goals, your thoughts about the guardrails, your support for Mr. James, who represents you very well and is a fierce advocate on your behalf, but also spends a considerable amount of time just giving feedback from the front line, so to speak, to his fellow school committee members, because it's important to hear. And Mr. James has been talking to us a lot about the social and emotional toll that this time of remote and hybrid has taken on you, particularly our high school seniors, as you're thinking, my God, I'm not having my senior year, you know, I've been 12 years in BPS, and now my senior year, I don't get to be in the classroom. And should I be applying to college? You know, the feedback we were getting from all of you about counselors was so important to hear. And rest assured, Mr. James has been talking to us about that publicly, but also privately, to make sure we get that feedback. So that's the beauty of an organization working together, because I know he gets the feedback from all of you, and then he brings it to our attention as well. But it was so great to hear from a wide variety of you today. Mr. James, is it okay if we allow the superintendent to say a few words?
Of course, Superintendent Casilius.
Well, thank you, Mr. James and Mr. O'Neill, for hosting this meeting today. I've been to, I think this is the third one that we've held, and we have several more to look at these 5 goals. They come out from our larger strategic plan, and so I wanted to make sure that all of you had a copy of that. I put it in the chat. So these are the goals that the school committee will look at for how they will hold themselves accountable to our strategic plan, and then kind of look at just a subset of the work that we have to do. There's a lot of work that we have to do. There are things on here that BSAC has told me that are important, that are in the strategic plan, but may not be listed here in the 5 goals directly, that the school committee members are listening to right now. But that doesn't mean it's not important or a priority for us to take up and to listen to, like social emotional learning, and making sure that, you know, you all are getting the resources you need for mental health services and for arts programming and athletic programming and all the other things that you've told me are really important to you. And so just know that that's part of a broader strategic plan. So I just want to thank you all for being here today, continuing to take this work really serious about our direction and the vision of our district, and providing really substantive and good feedback to us as we begin to think about the direction and how we align that to the budget and to the goals we hold ourselves accountable for. So, you know, I meet with you once a month, soon to be twice a month, and thank all of you for your incredible feedback that you give me as superintendent, and just the operational matters of the school district and not just the vision. So very appreciative to all of you for taking your time tonight or this afternoon.
Thank you, Superintendent. And I have to call out, you know, I said to folks, if you want to put something in the chat about what's the one thing you're willing to commit to. And Katie, I have to call you out. I think it's beautiful what you wrote. You said, I commit to continuing to engage students in our district's work. I hope to keep telling my fellow peers that they can be heard and explaining to them how. And I commit to you that you are heard, and that we want to hear you. We want your involvement. And so please make sure students know that they are heard, and that their input is value, and, you know, enjoy having these conversations about how the specific feedback translates into specific actions. Mr. James?
Yeah, I've gotten a little bit emotional during this meeting, and I've been quite emotional lately, you know, as my term comes to a close, and you know, just working on this very emotional and this really important work. I just want to again echo my thank you to my BSAC colleagues for being here and for showing up in this space and just really just bringing your voices to the table, and not just your voices, but using your voices to push for impact and translation of your ideas into actual action steps. So thank you for that. I know the tireless work that we all put in, and it's amazing. You guys make me feel safe and loved as I put in the chat, and I really appreciate you all. And then to the panelists as well, you know, to everyone here for just pulling this together and making sure that we can, really go out into our communities and ask them, what do you think about this? And, really be able to have that, build that, that sort of personal relationship and really hear what communities have to say. And then to our phenomenal interpreters for being here today. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Julia, City Councilor Julia Mejia, everyone knows that I've been working with her these past 2 months. And, when she says, and when I say, and when we say all means all, we're really talking about being inclusive, and that means breaking down language barriers. So I just do want to say thank you so much to the interpreters and to the district for getting these interpreters. I think, just to see so much language access is absolutely phenomenal. And with that being said, I'd like to just end by saying that if anyone has anything else to share, there is a feedback form that I believe someone will be putting in the chat. It's bostonpublicschools.org/school committee, where you can complete the feedback form on our potential goals and guardrails. So yeah.
Great, and thank you, Mr. James. As always, it was a pleasure to do this with you, to co-host this with you, and these have been valuable getting the feedback. So thank you all, and we look forward to your continued participation as the school committee moves forward in thinking through our goals and guardrails and now starting to add metrics to it. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.